Hi everybody. This is another screencast in a series of screencasts on OpenXML Word Processing ML. I've been introducing many aspects of Word Processing ML in these series. In these screencasts, I don't tell you every detail about each of the features that I discuss, but it's enough information to give you a good overview of what the feature is about and how it works. And in this screencast, I'm going to discuss images in OpenXML Word Processing ML. To get started, I'm going to create a document and put an image in it. I'll create a new Microsoft Word document, call it image.docx. I'll put a bit of text into this document. Now I'm going to go grab an image and insert it into this document. I'll use the snipping tool, grab just a bit of an image here. I'll copy that to the clipboard and come to my word processing document and insert the image. Now let's go take a look at the markup real quickly. I'm going to drag image.docx onto Visual Studio 2010 where I have the OpenXML Package Editor Power Tool installed. As of December 2012, the OpenXML Package Editor is available only for Visual Studio 2010, even though Visual Studio 2012 has been released. For this reason, I actually keep my machines with both a copy of Visual Studio 2010 and Visual Studio 2012, just for the purposes of running the OpenXML Package Editor in Visual Studio 2010. So here's the document that we can see. We can see there's this media folder, and in this media folder there is image1.png, and if we expand the nodes underneath document, we can see that there is this relationship from document.xml to media/image1.png. I'll click on there and press F4 to look at the properties. We can see that there is this relationship of RID5 for this particular relationship. The source is /word/document as expected, and the target is media/image1.png as expected. This is an internal relationship. You can have images that have an external relationship, and I'm going to show what that's about in just a bit here. And the type of relationship is this type here, which indicates that it is an image. And further, if we come over here and click on image1.png, we can see that the content type for this part is image/png. So that tells us what type of image we have in there, or that we could put a JPEG in there or a variety of other types of images, and we'll see that in just a bit here. And the full path to this part is /word/media/image1.png. One thing that we can do here is I can come over here in the OpenXML package editor, right click on that node in the hierarchy and export this image. And I'll export it as image1.png, and I'll click save. And we can see that that image shows up over here. And if I right click and click preview, we can see that sure enough, that does contain what we thought it contained. It contains that image that we put in our document. Let's go back here and look at the relationship again. You'll notice that this has a relationship of RID5. And if I open up the markup for document.xml, I'll format the XML, and I'll look for RID5. And here we can find the markup for that image. We can see that there's the body element, and below the body element there's this paragraph element, and below the paragraph element there's a run element, and then that run element contains a W:\drawing element, which contains this WP:\inline element, which indicates that this is an inline image. And we can see down here that this blip element refers to RID5, and that's how this markup finds the correct image in the OpenXML package to display at that particular location in the document. Now, One interesting point here is in previous screencasts on the Open Packaging Convention, I've made the point that relationships in an OpenXML document are not a hierarchy. They're actually a directed graph, which means that multiple parts can have a relationship to the exact same part. And one important reason why it's important that relationships in an OpenXML document be a directed graph and not a hierarchy is that we want to conserve space in a document. It's very common to have the same image located at multiple places in a document. A really good example is that if you have a corporate logo in a header and you have more than one header, each one of those headers can refer to the exact same image. Let me show you what that looks like. I'll come back into my document. I am going to copy that image, and I'll double click up here and I'll paste that image up in the header. I'll close the header and footer, save it. When I switch back to Visual Studio 2010, the OpenXML editor tells me that image.docx has changed outside the editor. Do I wish to reload it? And yes, I do. And you'll notice again that there is only one image in this document, this image1.png. And if I go to document.xml, I can see it has a relationship to that image. I'll press F4 and bring up the properties. So now it has RID 7 for the image in the main document part. And if I go to the header part, I can see that it also has a relationship to the exact same part, and in this particular case it has RID 1 for the relationship ID. And if I were to go into the markup for that header, I would find the markup that refers to the image with the relationship ID of RID 1, and if I were to go into the main document part, I would find the markup that contains the indication that the image has a relationship of RID 7. This idea that multiple parts can have a relationship to the same part, this was a particularly important feature when I put together Document Builder, that I needed to put together an image cache so that if Document Builder encounters multiple images in the document as it's building up the new document, it looks to see if a particular image is already in the image cache, and if it finds that image already existing, then it can reuse that image. Now, images can be external also. I'll come back over here and I'll reopen image.docx, and right here at the very beginning of the document, I'm going to insert a picture. It's going to ask me to browse for my picture, and I'll browse to my image1.png, and instead of inserting the image directly, I'm going to insert a link to the file. So there we have it. There's the image inserted as a linked image. Let's go look at that markup. And when I click back over here on Visual Studio again, I can reload it. And now when I look at the relationships from document.xml, in other words, the relationships from document.xml to other parts, I see that there is, of course, still this media/image1.png relationship, and there's also this relationship here that is an external relationship. You can see down here in the properties for that relationship that it's an external relationship. The target contains a file URI that indicates the location of that image. Other than that, everything else is basically the same. It has the same image type. It's just that we don't have the actual part in the document for that particular image. And of course, if you move this document to another machine where that particular path doesn't point to a valid image, then you get the behavior where in your Word document, Word just puts a square with an X through it, indicating that there should be an image there, but there isn't an image because Word can't find that image. Let's go back into our document again. Here I'll clean it up a bit so that we can examine various parts more easily. So now I have only one copy of that image. As I'm sure you're aware from editing documents, there are a lot of ways that you can put this image in your document. If you right-click on this image and tell it that you want to wrap the text in a different fashion, we can pick that here. I can tell it that I want to wrap it square. And what we're going to see here is when we do this, the image type changes from an inline image to a floating image. I'll save the document and close it, come back to Visual Studio and reload it. I'll open the document.xml part, and we'll see here that underneath the W:*drawing element, the WP:*inline element changed to a WP:*anchor element. So the key difference here is that an inline image is effectively contained in the paragraph that it's in. It affects the line height of the paragraph, and it affects the layout of that paragraph directly. When you have a floating image, the image is still anchored to the text, but it can be positioned absolutely relative to the page. Further, it can be positioned relative to the paragraph. I'm not going to get into the exact markup for each of those situations. It's relatively easy to find out that. Here we can see that the distance from the left here is this 114300, and the distance from the right is 114300. And these values are in something that are called emus. These emus are not a large flightless bird. They're actually a unit of measurement called the English metric unit. Let's go look at that in the OpenXML Standard. Here we can see the definition of the distl element that we looked at, and here we can see that the OpenXML Standard says that this distance shall be measured in English metric units. So what are these emus? If we go to section 20.1.2.1 in part 1 of the OpenXML Standard, we can see that the emu is a unit of measurement for length, and it's defined as 1/914,400th of an inch and 1/360,000th of a centimeter. This means you can completely accurately convert from emus to either inches or centimeters. And further, if you have either inches or centimeters, you can convert to an exact emu value. This is why this particular interesting unit of measure is defined in the OpenXML Standard. And that's where it gets its name. It's an English metric unit. It's actually a unit of measure that encompasses both English and metric units. Let's go look at the markup some more. In this anchored image, one of the pieces of markup that you're going to be interested in on occasion are this extent and the effect extent. The extent is the actual area that the image takes up, and the effect extent is the area that is taken up by the effect. So here we can see that it's about 4 times wider than it is high, and that matches up to what we know about that particular image, that it's 3,200,000 emus wide and 800,000 emus high. Now, watch what happens when I rotate that image. I'll come in here, I'll grab the image, and I'll rotate it and save it. The extent of the image is the same. It's 3,200,000 wide and 800,000 high. But now we can see that the effect extent is different, that the top of the image, the right and bottom of the image now have much larger values, and these reflect the new size of the space in the document that is taken up by that image because that image has been rotated. So you'll sometimes want to pay attention to both of these values, what the extent is, and that's the actual size of the image, and what the effect extent is. Now let's go back and unrotate our image, and I'm going to show you something else that we can do. I'll save it and close it. So now we have an unrotated image, and we're back to where we have our extent and effect extent being what they are. Now let's do another experiment. If we drop down here, we can see the picture properties here. These are in the SPPR element. And here we can see that the transform here has an element, a child element of ext, and there is the delta x and the delta y, or the size of x and size of y of that image in that transform. So I can change this to 200,000, save it, and reload it. And here we can see that I have effectively reduced the height of my image to 1/4 the height that it was. And if I come back here and I go into the extent and I change it from 800,000 to 200,000 and save it, by changing those two values, I have effectively changed the shape of my image in my document. But I have to change both values. I have to change the value down here, which does the transform of the image, and I have to change the value up here, which alters the space that that image takes up in the document. So for instance, I could come here and I could change this back to 800,000, reopen my document, and my image still is the same size, but the space taken up by that image is back to almost the original size of that image. By altering those two values, you can take any image of any size and place it in your document and control the size of the image and also control the amount of space that the image takes up in your document. Now, last but not least, let's walk through the process of inserting an image into a document. Let's say that there is a bookmark in this document and I want to put the image in place of that bookmark. I'll create a new document. I'll call it document with bookmark. I'll add some random text in there. And let's say that I want to put the image right in this document, right at this location. So I'll insert a bookmark and I'll call it bookmark image goes here. And I'll add that bookmark there. Now I'm going to drag document with bookmark onto Visual Studio so I can edit it in the OpenXML package editor. I'll open document.xml, and here I can see the bookmark that has the name image goes here. For what it's worth, I'm going to remove this go back bookmark. We don't need it for this particular scenario. We don't want it there. It just kind of clutters things up, and it's where Word marks the current location of editing. So the question is, what's the easiest way for me to generate the markup and include that image in this document? Well, the first thing that I need to do is I'll create a new folder here called Media. And then within this Media folder, I'm going to import a new part. I'm going to import it from my image.png, and the name of the part is going to be image1.png. The content type is going to be image/png, and it's not going to be compressed because PNG is already compressed. Now I have that image in my document. This is analogous to the operations that you take in the OpenXML SDK where you create a new part and then stream the image into the part. There are a number of examples out there that show the mechanics of doing this. I've got an example on openxmldeveloper.org that shows how to replace an image that's in a picture content control. You can find that content at this link. Now we've got that image in there, but we don't have a relationship to that image from our main document part. So what I need to do is I need to go over to document.xml and I'm going to add an internal relationship. I need to pick an ID for this relationship, and this ID, it doesn't really matter what this value is. When I'm generating documents, I generate these IDs using the GUID generator. So this generates a huge long hexadecimal string. The only thing that I do is I strip out the dashes and I prepend an R at the beginning of the GUIDs. It might be something like R, A, E, 3, 4, 1, 2, 5, 6, C, D, and so on and so forth. It's a big long number. We don't really care what that number is, other than that we need to keep it around because we're going to need that. So I'm going to copy that value and I'll paste it into Notepad so I'll have it around for later. And now when I add this new relationship, I have to go find the part that I'm going to have the relationship to. The relationship is coming from document.xml and it's going to image1.png. And I need to have the relationship type. So before I can actually add this, I need to go and find out what that relationship type is. So I'm going to make this easy for myself and I'm going to drag that original image.docx back onto the OpenXML package editor and I'm going to click on media/image1.png. I'll pull up the properties window by pressing F4 and then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to grab that relationship type right there and I'm going to paste that into my Notepad here. Of course, when you're writing a program to do this, this is all going to be directly embedded in your code. I'm showing the mechanics, I'm showing the plumbing in order to make this happen. When you actually write code to do this, it's a lot simpler. You just fabricate an RID, you look up what the image relationship type is, and you embed that right in your code in some form or another. Now I'll come back to my bookmark document, and I am going to add my internal relationship. My relationship is this random number right here. I'm going to have the relationship to this image1.png, and further the relationship type, I'm going to grab that from Notepad, and down here I'm going to paste that into the relationship type and then click OK. So now we've created this relationship from the main document part to our image part, and we can see our specially created resource ID down there. Now I need to add the markup into the main document part to include that image. And again, I'm going to make this easy on myself, and I'm going to go and grab the markup from that image document that we created previously. This is going to be an element that is going to come in underneath the run. So it's a child element of the run. And I'm going to just copy all of this markup from there to there. So I have this drawing element and all of its child elements. Here's where we want to insert that image. So the first thing I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to create a run element because this is going to be created below the run. And now I can just paste in that drawing markup. Because we're actually replacing the bookmark, I'll go ahead and get rid of that bookmark markup right there. And in this particular case, we know the extent because we're using the same image that we had before. If you have a different image, it's straightforward arithmetic to get the size of the image from the image that the .NET APIs have facilities to determine the size of the image. You can determine the bitmap, you can determine the size, and so on. In this particular case, we're going to put the image in its exact same size, so we don't need to modify either this extent element, nor do we need to modify the transform down here. We're just putting the image in as it is. But one thing that we need to do here now is we need to replace this RID7, and we have to replace it with our special resource ID. So I'm going to paste that resource ID right in there. Now I'm going to save that document, and I'm going to open my document with bookmark, and sure enough, my image is right in the spot where my bookmark was. Well, that's all I'm going to cover in this screencast. Thanks for watching. Come back often to openxmldeveloper.org. We're always producing new cool content. You can come to my blog at ericwhite.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at ericwhitedev, and you can follow OpenXML on Twitter at OpenXMLDev. See you later.